are joining us on Zoom, you can do the same. You can also vote on questions that interest you. And the questions that have the most votes, obviously, I am compelled to then pick those up and give them to our panelists. The key is our event passcode, Tbilisi 2024. And once again, you have to put in Tbilisi 2024. So if you have a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop, just launch your internet browser and enter www.pigeonhole.at into the address bar. And that's when you put in Tbilisi 2024, and once again, Tbilisi 2024. See that you get the spelling right. Tbilisi. Any questions? Please feel free. Of course, we maintain a respectful presence even in the pigeonhole, but please feel free to submit your questions. Yes. So, any questions on the pigeonhole question and answer, Mara? Oh, there you have it. You will. You needn't have listened to me. But we hope you will listen to our panelists. There is a context, of course. The forum has been concerned that IFIs and the ADB that we closely count out with all the time has been approaching just energy transition, not from a pro-people, pro-community perspective, but more from the perspective of corporations and seeing that people who are still in the fossil fuel industry are paid to continue while the thought is, of course, to bring them out of fossil fuels. There's also concern that there are some fossil fuel projects, like fossil gas, that are still supported by the ADB. Many concerns, but I should not be the one to front it. Our panelists are more qualified and able and raring to go to bring their issues before you. And without further ado, you see 5 of our panelists here, and the 6th, of course, hello Priyanka, is online. I'll introduce our panelists just before they speak so that my introduction doesn't go on too long. First, we'll have Tanya, who, do you know Tanya? How many of you do? She's actually all over the place. Both in your emails, in your WhatsApp, and in person. So she's the Just Transitions Advocacy Coordinator of the NGO Forum on ADB. Tanya, give us the context. What is the forum saying on just transition? Because really there are groups across the world who are speaking just transition. Now, it's the new buzzword, right? And everyone has something to say about just energy transition. What is the forum saying? Why does it think it needs to articulate its position very strongly? And what is this position?
Thanks, Vidya. So, from the NGO Forum on ADB, we do want to set the context for this discussion by providing a bit of background on the impacts and the implications of the ADB's energy sector financing, particularly those energy projects that are being financed in the name of decarbonization and just transition. So we're raising concerns today also with an eye to the fact that there is the upcoming midterm review of the energy policy in 2025. So first, in relation to our ongoing concerns about fossil fuel financing, from Pakistan to Indonesia to Bangladesh, among other countries, the ADB has not, we've seen that the ADB has not shied away at all from supporting the build-out of fossil gas over the years. However, we have seen that since 2021, especially with the adoption of the new energy policy, the number of fossil gas projects have decreased. Nevertheless, the grievances remain massive in the current projects where financing has been going and continues to go. And so our concern right now is that call for the ADB to commit to a rapid phase out of current financing for gas and to stay away from any kind of retrofitting with hydrogen production or for carbon capture and utilization. In the meantime, though, before the full phase out happens, it's absolutely incumbent for the ADB management and the board to take responsibility for those projects that have already been financed and to support the dismantling and decommissioning of these projects in line with a 1.5 degrees Celsius emissions pathway. So if the ADB board and management really consider it important to walk the talk of being a climate bank, the only option available is to support what civil society has been calling for, a fast, fair, forever, fully funded payments. For example, in Indonesia, there is, in fact, a paper trail of evidence about how ADB continues to finance directly through the support of the utility company PLN 2 new coal projects. And, as some of you may be aware, there is still direct financing from the ADB flowing into the development of the coal power unit in Pakistan, the 660 megawatt Jamshoro coal project, which was approved by the board in 2013. Yet disbursements continue even to this day. And in this case, the ADB board and management now still stand culpable for contributing to the build-out of coal projects with no evidence at this point that they have withheld funds or at the very least are supporting plans for financing the decommissioning of this project early in light of the commitments that have been made towards the Paris Agreement. Now, notably in this case, ADB does have leverage, which means that action can be taken. Now, second, I want to move into quickly on the issue of continued support for resource-intensive, highly damaging energy projects that do not and should not have any place in a just energy transition that will be sustainable and rights-based. We have been alarmed to see that it appears that support for new large hydropower projects are being considered for financing, including in Nepal, India, Mongolia, and Tajikistan, with recent announcements being made as recently as just at COP28, but also more even just the last couple of weeks. And these are and thirdly, just in terms of the ADB's energy transition mechanism and the way it's proceeding, we have recognized it as one of the ADB's flagship projects. But let's be clear, at this point, we have heard, even in writing from the ADB, that providing remedy and redress through the energy transition mechanism is beyond the scope of the scheme, whereas loans that will be provided for the companies are for compensation. And yet, in both pilots being selected in Indonesia and the Philippines, the shareholding companies continue to build out the coal fleet. And I just want to say briefly, I know earlier today we heard about the civil society, the crackdowns on civil society. And in terms of the ETM, what we've seen is that vocally, civil society in Indonesia, the Philippines, and Pakistan have raised clear concerns. But this has not been the case in Vietnam, where we've seen that prominent advocates of just and inclusive energy transition that would be free of harmful fossil fuel projects and also destructive dams have been threatened and incarcerated. This includes, as many of you know, Bob, who is a human rights and environmental justice lawyer, Nien, who spoke at last year's Asian Clean Energy Conference, and Hong, who championed the need to stop the build-out of fossil fuel infrastructure. And just my final word that I would like to make clear is that the understanding that we have seen is that, on the contrary from what is being proposed by the ADB, just transition from below, which is inclusive of principles, processes, and practices for building a collective economic, political, and social power to shift from an extractive to a regenerative economy where past harms must be redressed and where reparations are required as part of moving forward in a just and equitable way, and where human rights standards are upheld as non-negotiable, with the understanding that when the process of transition is not just, the outcome never will be.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya, for really setting the context, and the context is quite grim also in many parts of the world that the ADB chooses to work in. Priyanka, you'll have to hold your horses, and we'll go through a couple more of our panelists and then ask you to respond to all the points made, if that's okay with you. So we'll have two more speakers, and then I'll come to you, and then, of course, you will respond to the last speakers and to the questions that come in through Pigeonhole and from the room. Thanks. Next we have really a powerhouse, Mayank, who represents Gaia, Asia Pacific. Yes, Mayank, you must have a, yes.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I think we all agree that transition is imminent. No one denies that. No one is against that. So coal has been the dominant source of electricity generation for the past few centuries. The challenge of keeping global temperatures at 1.5 degrees needs to be fast, but also needs to be just. The good thing today is that renewable energy is now cheaper and expected to soon be cheaper than existing coal-fired plants. Then, if this is so, why are we trying to save the assets, quote-unquote assets, or the fleet of standing coal plants and create new problems by burning wastes alongside coal? These are not assets at all, but liabilities, since we already know that the full cost of energy from a coal power plant far outstrips the value of its electricity in terms of health damages, environmental pollution, climate change, destroyed land, and subsidies. But here we are focused on extending their life because the cost of decommissioning or shutting down them would be, some say, would be costly. One of the things that has come to the fore in saving these coal plants from shutting down is packaging them as carbon-neutral agents for climate change by firing coal with so-called, quote-unquote, renewable sources. And here I am going to talk about coal-firing coal with waste streams, which means, in simple terms, replacing a fraction of the coal with so-called less harmful or renewable sources of energy, like biomass waste or plastic waste, which is called refuse waste by municipal solid waste management, because it can't be recycled, so they're refused. The refuse waste, and so these options of burning them has come to the fore. They are being proposed to be coal-fired under SIF Act in the Philippines and Indonesia, and across energy transition mechanisms, SIF Act or other mechanisms, there seems to be a novelty around using waste and then turning them into energy. I'm going to say 3 things about why it is not going to benefit anyone except the coal plants. First, coal firing with waste, either by biomass, depends on one creative GHG accounting, which in the end only makes the coal plants eligible for renewable energy subsidies. The first creative accounting, there's 2. They are going to be burned anyway. In this case, it is better to burn waste and reduce our burning of coal. But if the waste is going to be recycled or reduced, this assumption is going to fall apart. There is a whole industry, a whole sector relying on the recycling of waste. But we burn them, we lost all the economic benefits, co-sharing of benefits from these. There are greater economic, social, and political benefits from using biomass waste than burning them. Second, creative accounting. Waste is not carbon neutral. Biomass waste did not start from being waste. They were grown, extracted, manufactured, and consumed before they have become waste. Using them as feedstock does encourage deforestation and monocropping agriculture are the same intensive production systems responsible for the climate crisis. Wahi, I am sure he is with us, has been leading the protests against co-firing of biomass waste in Indonesia under the SIF Act. And this will only encourage deforestation and legal lobbying for these co-firing proposals. On the other hand, plastic waste from into pellets for burning into kilns such as coal plants creates a lifeline to one of the largest GHG emitter being the subject of an ongoing plastic negotiations to curb plastic pollution. Throughout their life cycle, plastics, which is the most unrecyclable plastic waste streams, have a significant carbon footprint and emit 3.4% of global emission, and is likely to contribute 19% of GHG emissions by 2040. Second, they are financially risky investments. We heard this, that with slight modifications, coal plants can be co-fired with biomass and coal plants, but that is not true. Even in the industry, if you see their webinars, their lectures, they even they recognize that retrofitting these coal plants with biomass and solid refuse wastes are very expensive. The air pollution control requirements, which are almost half of the cost of the plant, are quite different. And because solid fuel plastics are more complex wastes, when you burn them, they create more complex emissions that coal plants do not produce. They produce dioxin and furans, and that are more expensive to comply with or to monitor. Most coal, especially in Asia Pacific, won't have that equipment as experienced in the infamous Naga coal plant, except maybe for the filter for particulates. Fly ash from burning waste is much more toxic than coal fly ash, as they generate other pollutants and emissions. Continuous monitoring for a much wider range of air pollutants is needed. Companies may reuse the existing furnace, but given that waste has a high water content when we use biomass, much more heterogeneous than coal, so there needs to be pre-treatment technologies which are very expensive. You need drying, etc. Right. And lastly, they do not encourage policy coherence and accountability within ADB's policy infrastructure and with international instruments. In ADB energy policy, it commits to withdrawing from financing new coal-fired power plants and heating plants, support BMCs in achieving a planned phase-out of coal in the Asia and Pacific region. What we see are plans for extending coal plants and creating new problems by using waste. Another paragraph or provision in ADB energy policy, paragraph 7-1, is that when we invest in burn technologies from utilization of waste, it will be based on a prudent hierarchy of waste, with options starting from reduction, segregation, collection, and recycling before waste-to-energy and landfilling. But this is not happening because we are fixed on using waste as a feedstock for energy. This is not aligned with the international response with significantly well-developed international governance systems with the objectives of protecting human health and environment from hazardous chemicals and waste, including plastics, such as Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, and Minamata conventions, all regulating hazardous emissions, dioxin, furans, and mercury out from incineration activities. So as Tanya said, we need to undertake justice transition principles when we conduct all our negotiations, all our planning, but we do not see this in the processes in the SAFE Act in Indonesia and the Philippines. In the Philippines, we have one-day consultations. And this is not enough to address, say, multi-stakeholder consultations, everyone happy at the end of the day. So these are not enough, especially considering that the context in which the SIF acts are placed are in the context of shrinking civil spaces and reprisals to activists. And hence we need to plan for closures and phase outs from false solutions, and we need policy alignment with all the energy or policy instruments within ADB and with international conventions.
Thank you. Tanya has been educating the ADB staff for quite a while now on waste to energy, and their ideas hopefully are changing after listening to Gaia and Mayan. So clearly, a lot of false solutions still being taken very seriously by the ADB, and we hope that the voices in the room actually reach all of you that need to take action. Let us go to my left. We've all been talking of right-wing governments coming down hard on us wherever we are. Let's go to Indonesia, and Titi is actually ED of AXI for, what is it? For a mouthful, actually. But Titi is ED of AXI for Gender, Social and Ecological Justice. So just the person we want in the room, that she established together with 4 other Indonesian colleagues in 2012. She also happens to be a member of the International Committee of the NGO Forum on ADB. And she will present to you one question, because Titi always has questions that are very important for us to think over collectively. And of course, she will strongly bring out the community's perspective on some so-called solutions that the ADB still supports and believes in. Yes, Titi.
Thank you, Vidya. Good morning, everyone. So I will actually pose a question that already long in my mind. What is actually just energy transition, just transition? Because right now, everywhere, whether it is union, CSO, even the banks adopt the notion of just. The question is, what is just in our and their understanding? So for that, I'm trying to... Okay. So one, I just want to share with you one of the most loved to be financed sector by the banks, ADB, World Bank, CIF, part of it, Green Climate Funds, which is the geothermal. So right now, Indonesia has in the second place of the geothermal, and it started actually also with the financial scheme by the CIF 2013, where we can see the scheme, where all the contribution of the ADB, IBRD, and so on and so on. At that time, we asked the board of the CTF not to approve this project because 70% of the geothermal reserve in Indonesia is actually in a forest protected area. And the answer we got, develop a mitigation measure. Okay, how? How you can develop mitigation measure if the forest is already destroyed by this development? So this is the plan for geothermal in Indonesia. Along the Ring of Fire, Sumatra, Java, East Island, Sulawesi, Maluku. More than 500 potential sites And some is already, the red dot is actually the one that already operated. And this is, it is not a good record. It is actually disastrous for Indonesia. Because we are on the ring of fire, very vulnerable to earthquake, and the operation of geothermal will trigger earthquake. Also, the earthquakes when happen, it also can disrupt the exploration or the exploitation of geothermal. So some examples. Looks at the design phase. The one that knows Indonesia, you know how beautiful is the Samosir Island. It's an island in Sumatra, and it declares as one of the geothermal plague site, and it's it's a place where people depends their livelihood from agriculture and livestock. It will be destroyed. And also another geothermal examples in Gunung Raja Basa in South Sumatra, Lampung. That's the place where the people, if the tsunami happens, they will run to that place, and this place will be taken over by geothermal. So when tsunami happens, where the people should go? And exploration stage, particularly in Mount Slamet in central Java. You know, the exploration is on the slope of the volcanoes, and it's really triggered mud pollution because the land clearings in the top of the mountain is really not manageable, and they just throw away the waste and the clearing, and that's the problems. And you will see one of the pictures of the spring, the waterfall. It was the nice waterfall become so muddy. So the loss of livelihood of the local community is until now they cannot recover. Water scarcity, and if there is a water scarcity, who will work harder to get water for the family? The women. And of course, lack of information, consultation, and then the real problems that faced particularly by the women is they are trapped in debt because they need money to survive, and they have to go to the local money lender, and it increased the vulnerability of women for sexual and violence against women. And then exploitation phase we also see in DA, for example, which extension is supported by the ADB, and also in Flores, beautiful islands, which is also destroyed because there is a 29 geothermal site, and then it's declared as a geothermal island. So this is the situation with geothermal. And the question is just transition. What is just transition? So just transition, it doesn't mean it's just change of the type of energy. So transformative economic development is we should change from the extractive economic models towards the regenerative, low carbon and sustainable. Not low carbon, but not environmentally and socially unsustainable. So the transition is really need to be paid attention, and also based on what actually people's need, not only priority of pampering the corporation, because the whole thing is about investment. We need just transition, which is come from the needs of the people, not the needs of the corporation. And of course, involve women, but sadly, the new safeguard policy ignore the protection of women from this kind of projects. I think I end up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Titi, for bringing wonderfully the concerns of the people of Indonesia into this room, and really this is reflected in most of Southeast Asia, South Asia. We know that in some regions here, geothermal is more acceptable, but in other regions, I think the ADB, like ours, the ADB has to be cognizant that this is clearly considered a false solution and is rejected by communities because of the impact. Of course, and there are several other false solutions that may not have come up, except, of course, I think you also talked to them. So, carbon capture, utilization, storage, BECS, etc. I think it's now time that Priyanka actually responds to some of the issues that have been laid out for the ADB. Priyanka, are you there? Don't just walk out on us and all our questions. There you are, okay. Priyanka Vijayatunga is actually the Senior Director for ADB's Energy Sector Office, and it's a post he's held since August 2021. He's always been willing to come on board and talk to civil society, explain things as the ADB sees it. Today we have explained to you how we view just energy transition. And we want your response to that. The ladies have, pushed things hard at you. We want to hear your response. Yes, Priyanka.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. And first of all, let me really appreciate on behalf of my energy community for the concerns you have raised. And I'll try my best to answer, not more in a more generic manner rather than going to specifics, because I think it's unfair by the project council if I go into specifics, and we can always take it up in detail on a project-by-project basis along with the project officers. So I'll try to be more generically making my answers and try to cover all the points that have been raised during the discussion. To start with, let me articulate again the Energy Policy 2021, and I have been fortunate to be part of it right throughout, starting from the 4 periodical consultations we have had on the draft energy policy at the time. And we finally managed to come to a consensus and get this energy policy finally through our board and in October 2021. Now, this energy policy is based on 5 important principles. Particularly, these principles are very much relevant to the Asia-Pacific region. In a region where we still have issues of energy access. Today, the latest count we have is we don't have energy access to, electricity access to 54 million people in our region, and about 350 million people still suffer from unreliable, poor supplies of electricity. And therefore, energy access is very important principle on which we have to base our energy sector operations. Then the second is obviously not is equally important, that is environmental sustainability, where we try to address the climate change concerns along with all the other environmental concerns we have in energy projects. So the governance, you cannot do anything in the energy sector properly if you don't have the proper governance in the energy sector in place, and we support energy sector governance, therefore, to make it right, to improve the investment environment, to improve governance. Then the regional cooperation and integration is another important area, because unless you cooperate both sub-regionally, regionally, and across Asia-Pacific regions, you may not be able to achieve the maximum benefits of the clean energy systems with the virtually transit. And finally, most important, also an equally important thing, we have to recognize that the energy sector works in cross-sectoral sense. We cannot work energy sector alone. We have to think of cross-sectoral interactions and how we can maximize the developmental impact through cross-sectoral interventions rather than trying to address energy sector issues alone within the energy sector. So this is the overall principles within which we have set up, set about our energy policy, and which was agreed upon at that time. So within this, if I reiterate, we have been the first NGB to clearly reiterate within its policy that we will not finance any coal power projects. In fact, there is one elaboration on this, that is to say that we can still intervene in coal power projects if we are not extending the lifetime of existing coal power plants, but brings down or reduces environmental emissions. So only such circumstances we can intervene in coal power projects, investments, and in fact energy transition mechanism is the intervention we have within that policy. And that is very clear in para 75. We cannot, we have ruled out financing coal power projects. Then para 74 clearly says that we will not finance any upstream, midstream and downstream oil-fired power projects unless there are no other options, unless it is supporting clean energy solutions in some form, in very specific cases, particularly in places like small island nations, where oil-fired projects might actually help as a backup to renewable energy integration. Unless we have such situations, we will not finance any oil-fired power plants. Then para 76 is very clear on our position on gas. And again, we have brought in very strong restrictions and screening criteria on gas-fired projects. Unless we find it, the projects which we are looking at, there is no other alternative, cleaner alternative, economically and financially viable and environmentally sustainable. If we don't have any alternatives, if it deals with energy access, then only we can think of gas-fired projects, gas projects. Even then, you have very clear screening criteria, which is spelled out in the energy policy, para 76. And but overall, as Tanya quite rightly said, since the approval of 2021 energy policy, we have had virtually almost no gas projects except in one of the cases where it was mostly on energy efficiency improvement or replacing existing inefficient fossil gas projects with efficient gas-fired projects with not using anything additional gas, but it's within the same gas consumption, but putting out more electricity for energy access. Now that's the only, those are the only projects we have had in recent past. Then on waste to energy, para 71 ADB has very clearly indicated when it comes to waste to energy investments or heat or electricity, we will support provided that the feedstock for combustion results from a prudent order of waste management priority. I am not a waste to energy expert, but I should clearly mention that unless we follow prudent order of waste management, we will never go ahead with waste to energy power plants or particularly incineration. We first look at reuse, recycle, and repurposing before we really go into waste to energy. So these are very clear within the energy policy, and whatever we do within ADB will have to strictly comply with this energy policy. All these projects usually come to us in my team to look at the policy compliance. And then on top of that, we have other policies that is safeguard policy statement, and the safeguard office has the task of looking at every project for safeguard compliance. So when it comes to environmental, social safeguards, indigenous peoples, all that will have to comply very strictly with our safeguard policy statement. Then on top of that, all the energy projects, or for that matter, all the projects in the sovereign space, and by next year, non-sovereign space will have to comply with, or rather follow Paris alignment, fully Paris alignment. In fact, even now, all our sovereign projects and almost all private sector projects are looked at always from the Paris alignment viewpoint, and so the projects are supposed to be Paris aligned. And so if you look at this overall framework, it's most of the concerns expressed today are basically, I must say, it's unlikely we will have these as concerns as we move forward in all our energy projects. And when it comes to, as I said, fossil fuel projects, I have basically brought in the concerns and how we have addressed. Now, looking at large hydropower projects. Now, large hydropower, it's understood, it's accepted globally that large hydropower, or for that matter, overall hydropower investments will play a very important role when it comes to addressing climate challenge. And because that is probably one of the very few options we have for one-to-one replacement of fossil fuel projects in terms of the need for baseload generation in a power system. So, but that, having said that, you have to make sure that these power projects comply with our safeguard policies and all the other policies that the bank has. So there will be strict compliance needed when it comes to safeguard aspects of large hydropower projects, and based on that we move forward. So we have large hydropower projects in our pipeline, but we will make sure that ADB, these power projects will follow all ADB policies to the letter. And we will make sure that there are no other alternatives to these large hydropower projects we have in the pipeline. And we have to keep in mind these large hydropower projects will serve the local communities, local populations in terms of hydropower exports, bringing in economic development for these countries, and also particularly those in the localities in the form of direct employment, indirect employment, and economic activity. Now, so we have to keep the whole package inside when it comes to taking decisions, but all the ADB policies will have to be compliant. As for our energy transition mechanism, we have at the moment two pilots, one pilot being considered in a very advanced stage in the Philippines, in Indonesia, and that is actually going through the rigorous process of compliance in all ADB projects, ADB policies, and I'm sure our staff, the teams make sure that they strictly follow that. And when it comes to, there is another project which is being considered in the Philippines, and I'm sure our Philippines will do the same in terms of policy compliance. And we have our own teams within ADB to make sure such compliance is strictly adhered to. So I probably stop here, and my overall summary is that we know these concerns, we are quite conscious of these concerns, and we try to address all these concerns within the overall ADB policies and guidelines we have had, and we currently have. And just to add to that, we have two important guidance notes on large hydropower and natural gas and waste to energy, providing more detailed approach to how ADB follows or rather invests in these technologies. I think I stop here for the time being, and any further questions coming later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka, for your response. I know that there are some things that haven't been covered and some things have been. And really, the proof of the response pudding is in how we will ingest it and what pushback comes back, or will we reject your response pudding. But here there are a couple of people who would like to respond on specific facts. And I think because you talked of large hydro and how the ADB looks on it, I will go directly to Dato, who is from Georgia. And Dato Chupashwari is the ED of Green Alternative. And basically, everywhere where there are large hydro projects, we have dam-affected communities that we heard earlier also during the management session about dam projects where project-affected communities have unresolved grievances and real problems that have never been redressed. And I think we hear a little more about things like that from Georgia. And Priyanka, do listen in very hard so that you can reconsider your position. Yes, Dr.
Thank you. Hello. Good morning, everybody. Yes, actually, the picture that you are seeing on the screen, this is a 187 megawatt shore heavy hydropower plant funded by not only by the ADB but by the EBRD and IFC as well. And this project's initial investment on this project was 420 million USD. Why initial, you might ask? Because once it was launched in 2017, and I want to say that this project consists of the 2 large dams, 3 derivation tunnels with a total length of more than 32 kilometers. So this project, once it was launched, in 2 months, all 3 tunnels either collapsed or appeared in a very dangerous situation. An additional over 100 million was spent for the rehabilitation, and more than 2 years took company to rehabilitate newly launched hydropower plant. And after this rehabilitation, you see still how this newly rehabilitated hydropower plant looks like. So why I started with such facts? Because when ADB, EBRD and IFC were coming to the communities and saying that they are bringing added value, that this project will be constructed in line with the international best practices, standards and so on, we and locals unfortunately received such kind of infrastructure project. Interesting here is that problem with this is that this project was constructed in geologically active zone, and construction of these tunnels that I mentioned, the company was using blasting method in the vicinities of the villages when they were drilling the tunnels there. And surprisingly, company hasn't made any detailed geological assessments and surveys before starting the construction works. And when these construction works were starting, everything was shaking in the area, which resulted, in serious consequences for those communities who were living along the project site. One of the problematic issues in this project was that companies not only started these construction works without detailed geological assessments, but they didn't define project impact area. And when we were raising these issues with the banks were claiming all the time that everything was fine, that everything, and that they even funded the project. And from this 420 initial investments, 90 million was coming from ADB, 86 million was coming from EBRD, and another 90 million was coming from the IFC. And everyone was assuring the locals that everything was fine. And in order to kind of cover this issue, even with the villages, companies signed so-called warranty contracts, meaning that they were claiming that everything was so fine before starting construction. Everything was so fine that if there will be any impacts, they will compensate for that. You see in these pictures, on the right side of the pictures, you see cracked houses. Because this is from Makalakizevi village, this is unfortunately only one village which submitted complaint to all international financial institutions, including ADB, and mediation process for the problem-solving started. And what they were claiming, this village, was that because of the company's operations, because not assessing properly the impacts, they were requesting from the banks compensations in line with their own standards. So why they were requesting the compensations from the banks? Because government of Georgia was so cynical that they proposed compensations to these families like $10,000 for a second. For $10,000 in Georgia, you cannot buy even ice cream, I think. And during the mediation, it was very interesting that during the mediation process, all parties, companies, as well as a company as well as the bank representatives, mediators, they were all agreeing that the compensation proposed by the government was not enough and was not sufficient. But you see here this kind of quotas from this mediation process that I took exactly from the ADB. It was company refused compensation, like totally refused the compensation, saying that these risks and everything that happened, it was not their fault. And do you know how this mediation process finished? With the hope that outside of this problem-solving mediation process, that someone will continue communication with the communities and they will, I don't know, compensate or not. Do you know what happened? It's actually in 2022 finished, I think, this mediation process. Do you know what happened since mediation conclusion has been drawn? Nothing. I have collective ledger now. I brought in, I want to give it to the management of the ADB. They are asking, now what? Company refuses fully to compensate. Government cynically proposing this $10,000. They are disagreeing with this. So who will take responsibility for the damages that this hydropower plant brought on the ground? And in this upcoming revision of environmental social policies, I think one of the issues needs to be exactly that the bank should play a proactive role in this and create some kind of mechanism or tool when the company also cynically refusing to compensate for the damage that they are posing, to compensate these families. And based on all this, and just one issue that I wanted to say is that after this mediation process finished, we as an NGO submitted a complaint to the EBRD. And EBRD's Independent Recourse Mechanism, or PCM by that time, recognized that the company started construction works without detailed geological assessments, which directly links all these damages to the banks as a bank's responsibility. So now we are, because we know that ADB is also starting to activate all this funding for the hydros, claiming that they are just, clean, green, and whatever they are. Based on this, and not only on this hydropower plant case, how ADB is ensuring just, fair, clean, green, and a lot of other words, transition, and why they are sticking to the hydropower plant rule. Because this is not only the case of Georgia. This is the case for all over the world. We can even name the road, for example. I don't want to take much of your time, but here are the questions that I hope the bank will respond to it, because local communities right now are really also waiting for the responses. What will be with them? Who will compensate the damages that has been caused by this project? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dato. I think those are very important questions up there on the screen also for everyone to think about. And time and again, this is coming up from communities, that when harm has been done, what next? How does the ADB own up its responsibility? How does it offer redress and reparation? This is a question that we've been asking maybe for 30 years. And really, the answer hasn't changed much. So we may be at the 57th annual meeting, but we hope that by the 58th or the 60th at least, the ADB has really good plans for redress, reparation, and really showing that it is a people's bank from Asia, doing things a little differently and really walking the talk. And his questions, of course, are reflected by many in the room. I see Indira here, I see Jiten from the Northeast, other people from across here. Please remember that the pigeonhole is still open for your questions before we move to the final panelist. Priyanka will then respond after we open the floor and the pigeonhole questions. And thereafter, maybe the panelists can have a short 1 minute each before we actually close. Over to somebody who's really a strong voice in the Asia region, somebody we are quite proud of, J.D. Gardenera. He's the national coordinator of Alianza Tigilmina, a coalition of community organizations and groups collectively challenging destructive, large-scale mining in the Philippines. But of course, JB is also associated with other anti-mining groups in different parts of the world. Over to JB to tell us about the implications of ADB's climate-smart mining.
Thank you, Nigel. Good morning, everyone. My contribution in the next few minutes will revolve around the issue of transition minerals. The banks, including the ADB, but most notably, even the United Nations, have harped in the past few years that to achieve the clean energy dream and to achieve the Paris commitment, more mining and more extraction are needed. In fact, just this week, the United Nations has convened a working group on critical minerals, precisely to address the seemingly impossible target of doubling or tripling the number and volume of these transition minerals that are required for the clean energy. So, my points would revolve around three areas that I hope can be references both for the ADB and us, civil society, on how we can navigate this landscape of second and maybe succeeding generations of issues of human rights and shrinking space and consent around transition minerals. The first aspect I would like to touch is a general issue around mining. And hopefully these points on this first area will provide some caution on the bank in proceeding with its climate smart mining track. The second area I want to talk about is what I call when climate smart mining isn't so smart. And I hope to bring some interesting facts about it. And then third, we have an unpublished paper within the Asia-Pacific Gathering on Human Rights and Extractives. And this paper is also being discussed by the Thematic Social Forum on Mining. And we would like to present these recommendations as a starting point for us CSOs, but we're not greedy, we shared it with the banks, also as a starting point on how to possibly refresh and get a new perspective. So, some general issues about mining. And I present these 3 points on this first area. Number 1, almost all current mining laws in every member state are outdated. Most of them were passed in the early 90s or the mid 90s. All of these mining laws are blind to climate justice, gender justice, and human rights. So, if we are going to proceed with business as usual in creating more mines in mining, with all of these laws blind to climate, gender, and human rights issues, then we are just extending all the problems that we are already confronting with. Second, most of the investments and plan to invest on expanding more nickel, lithium, cobalt, all the transition minerals in the pipeline, whether proposed by the industry or by governments, are all extensification. They just want to extend mining land. They want to expand more mining projects. There is no transformative plan on how really recycling, materials technology, or the intensive, how can we actually achieve the clean energy without creating more problem areas. Third, I'd like to introduce the concept of sacrifice zones. Most of our governments and the mining industry are justifying more mining because of the clean energy requirement. But still disregarding the already existing problems of dislocation, cultural displacement, loss of livelihoods, all the other environmental and social safeguards are being disregarded in the name of getting access and later on in the supply chain of these transition minerals. So, when does climate smart mining doesn't appear to be so smart? I think the bank should really take a pause and start talking seriously with environmental and human rights groups and even the academia on when does climate smart mining that isn't really smart. First, precaution, climate smart mining is part of a long-running narrative of the banks. First, it was sustainable mining. And then it got shut down since 2020 from the Rio Plus 20 summit. No government or no mining company could explain what sustainable mining was. And then there came responsible mining, which a lot of groups and even governments are now worried because there's no legal definition of what responsible mining is. And I think the bank is treading on both dangerous and comedic area when they start insisting on climate smart mining. And I think the first investment or loan is in Mongolia. And climate smart mining is not smart when first the investment fails to consider the whole supply chain, or when the supply chain is blind in some areas. So for example, yes, the GCF will invest on e-mobility and electric vehicles, but it's blind to the problems being caused by the nickel mining in Indonesia and the Philippines. And you can multiply that in many other supply chains that were intended to address the clean energy targets, but remain blind when the host country or the host communities are suffering. Second, all the technical assistance and policy letting of ADB about climate smart mining will be coming to nothing if corruption and transparency and accountability are relegated as secondary concerns of the policy letting. I can name the senators and the members of our parliament who are beneficial owners of mining company in the Philippines. Our friends in Indonesia and in India can do that. So unless that beneficial ownership and regulatory capture is addressed, there's no amount of climate smart mining that will happen. My time is up. Let me jump to my recommendation. And this is our starting point where we propose both constructive engagement with the bank without sacrificing our own disruptive processes should the bank refuse to listen. So some recommendations. Number one, I think when you proceed with the policy lending on extractives, when you want to update mining laws or extractive laws on the member organizations, please be mindful it's not only about the mining law. There are many other laws in that country or in that member state that are in direct conflict with the extractive laws. The coherence and alignment of these laws must be present in any policy lending. Second, I think we should redefine what is the cost and benefit analysis. When the bank insists that the cost of extraction and the cost of energy is the cost of doing or extracting that energy, but still blind on the cost, environmental cost, political cost, human cost, cultural cost, health cost. These are the costs that are being borne by the communities. If that remains to be a blind side, then it is not a just transition. Finally, we think banks should seriously take consideration of all other frameworks there. Sustainable consumption, big growth, circular economy. Those are the things that should be on the table and not simply disregarded. Let me end by quoting some of our friends from the Earth Justice Network. We cannot justify a clean energy future by harming the people and the environment that are hosting this extraction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Powerfully spoken for mining affected communities across the world, I think. We all know that in our countries, COVID-19, the pandemic was used as an excuse to expand mining further, saying we need this for economic recovery. And of course, as JB pointed out, the other spur has been, of course, clean, green technologies requiring critical minerals. And I think we need to shy away from calling them critical minerals. They are transition minerals, and mining, of course, of transition minerals also leave a deep hole in the lives of communities who inhabit that region. Thank you, JB. And for all of us, the floor is open now. Through Pigeonhole, we've got a few questions that have come in. But yes, from the floor, let's hear first from the person who first raised their hand in the back, Jitain, and then Jitain over there, and then Sukarel, and then the young man there. Good people. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the presentations to all the panelists. I'm Stin Jumna. I work with the Center for Research and Advocacy, Manipur, Northeast part of India. I would like to extend solidarity and also join the concern raised from our colleagues, friends from Georgia on the impact of Narsan. I would like to supplement that it's really important to take into consideration the disasters that are associated with the increased construction of Narsan. Because I just want to highlight the recent case of dam disaster in northeast part of India. The disaster, the breach of this Tisa-3 dam. This is a dam, 1,200 megawatts. It's a huge colossal dam that just cracks. And why it cracks? Because of the climate change. The melting of glaciers in the Himalayas. Yeah, and of course the corruption and the other factors. The building dam in the Himalayas, the fragility of the land, having that consideration of the people's rights and concern. Those are things. But I just want to flag up that dams are very much associated with disaster. And dams are more unfeasible because of the climate change in itself. Yeah? And dams, it unleash massive impact, not just on the people, but also the environment. And I would also like to highlight that dams involved in this particular dam that I'm referring to, it involves more than $1.4 billion. So it's a huge waste of public money. So it's very important that we look into the resources, and also how we entail the bus system. And so I would request ADB to consider assessing the financing of large dam, and it is not clean, it's not just, and it cannot be considered as part of the just energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jiten. Thank you, Sutura. Can we have 2 mics going around the place, please? Here. Or someone who's faster.
Hello, my name is Sutra. We work as OT Watch on mining, but also as Rivers Without Boundaries on energy and infrastructure projects. And I'd like to raise, I think I might say it's maybe 2 or just 1 question, and it's related to just transition and transition minerals. Mongolia, as JD mentioned, is part of this climate smart mining project, but generally it is very high on the list of attractive sites for transition minerals, critical minerals. And in this age of rush for transition minerals, I think one thing that we need to look at is that policy-based lending and TAs are not covered by strategic, by safeguard policies and standards. And I think TAs and policy-based lending actually lay ground for those projects that have harm on the ground, on the environment and the people. But when we try to raise these issues and raise issues with compliance with ABAC's policies, we're being told that TAs and policy-based lending does not cause harm on the ground. No, they do. They lay the ground for those harms on the environment, ecology, and water. So my proposition or recommendation is A, start covering TA projects and policy-based lending financing according to the same categorization of potential risks. That's one. And second, ADB's financing, supposedly saying they're doing climate smart things, but they are financing infrastructure for mining. And then when you talk about infrastructure for especially power and electricity and heating, it's coal, number 1 in Mongolia. And ADB is continuing building coal infrastructure and hydro. So recommendations not to go.
Thank you. Thank you for the very actually illuminating and strong recommendations. Yes, the young man and then Gurpreet, and then you, and I must confess that we are supposed to be 9 minutes from the close. Can we take 14 minutes, 5 minutes more? Okay, yeah. So keep your intervention short, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will keep it really brief. So my name is Andrew Kraska. I'm from Asserting Center Asia. I'm doing some climate finance around that issue. So my question is, I want to ask to ADB. So currently ADB has ETM as part of like the JETP. They want to link between ETM and the JETP. And then I would ask like, how does ADB see this connection further, and what will ADB roles, and how does it connect with these 2 initiatives? I'm just afraid, for example, like if ETM will be part of like inspired for broader transition contracts within the JETP, I hard to admit that ETM has already failed to achieve the just transition, because basically, for example, what happened in Indonesia. At the end, first project, Cirebon, it doesn't consult with any civil society organizations right before they announce in the public that Cirebon will be the first coal power plant that will be subject for the early coal retirement. And another thing is, of course, like I would like to ask, like, how is the ADB roles in the future within the JLP? Because basically at the moment, ADB, for example, like in Indonesia, they lead the finance working group. But I'm just afraid that ADB is not fit with purpose for leading this working group, and it's not independent because also has some vested of interest. Because at the moment, ADB has no kind of like progressive commitment to stop funding the cuts. So I would say like that's my two questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good. Yes.
Yeah, good.
Sorry.
No worries. My question is also to Priyanka, two quick questions. First is within the JETP framework, both in Indonesia and Vietnam, if the larger civil society itself is silenced, because when we write about Vietnam, there's 5 defenders plus 1 energy policy expert, somebody who spoke at ADB's last ASEF and has consulted for it. They were incarcerated for tax evasion charges and then for access to information, appropriation of document charges. When the larger civil society itself is silenced, where the safeguards are truly not very helpful. So how does the ADB plan to fill that gap? Does it include in the country policy? Does it include in the country mapping? How is it trying to do it? Second, on this, kind of the mood of the boom around hydro. Isn't the ADB taking a very tunnel vision on hydro, considering the fact that one, the methodology around greenhouse gas emission is still very much contested, and second, the fact is that hydro always comes with other infrastructure like transmission lines. And there again, it's very easy to pass on the responsibility, saying this one's coming from Chinese financing, this one's coming from EIB, and then environmental assessments are separate for each one of them. So the cumulative harm is actually much more. And also the long-term harm to river life. And so by saying that it's only restricted to as a climate change solution, with only energy shifting it from coal, is not going to help.
Absolutely. The interconnectedness. Yes. President? Yeah.
Thank you. Adrian from Malaysia, from the Right Energy Partnership. I'd like to just raise an issue about community-led renewable energy systems. And of course, we've heard a lot in this deliberation, in our discussion, that large dam is definitely not sustainable. But there is also have to be important part that is small-scale hydropower that is run by communities and whereby it's also being developed by the community themselves and owned by the communities. And how does this initiative can be supported by ADB rather than supporting all these large-scale hydro that is not going to be benefiting a single watt to the communities? And I think these are something that we should always be and has to pay attention to. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. And I think he does wonderful work to further what he's saying. Would you hand it to the gentleman there? I'm like at the verge of shutting off people.
Thank you. Daniel Willis from Recourse. Tanya made reference to ADB's financing of PLN in Indonesia. And look, I'm sure Priyanka will say that the energy policy says that ADB doesn't finance coal. We read the energy policy, we know that's what it says as well. The truth is, in this project, the terms of the loan agreement don't say that. They say that PLN can use the money from ADB for any of its activities. And our concern is that means that PLN will just use it as a general purpose loan and fund the expansion of huge coal power in Indonesia. So my question to Priyanka is, will ADB investigate this and will they remediate any of the harmful?
Thank you. Very well. So just 30 seconds. Yeah, but only if the mic gets to you very quickly. Run, fire on the water. So meanwhile, I know that somebody is on Zoom putting up his hand. Hussain Jarrar from Pakistan, you're on next. Please unmute your mic.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a deaf lawyer from India. My question is, so anything that we are planning at ADB, including the climate justice policy, can we probably also include the disability lens in it? Because 10 to 15% of world's population is actually composed of persons with disability. So any discussion, any discourse, including climate change, has to include it. Yeah.
Any discussion on climate change has to be?
Has to include persons with disability.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Hussain Jarrar. Sahab, are you there? Hussain. Meanwhile, Jarrar Sahab is from Indus Consortium, which is a consortium of 60 NGOs in Pakistan. They monitor the Jamshoro coal-fired plant, which is, of course, funded by the ADB. And therefore, I think it would be important to listen to him, that while we talk of just energy transition and repurposing in Pakistan, the support for coal goes on. Hussain? Meanwhile, let me, I know that I'm out of the time that I also, no, I'm not yet out of time. I have 6 minutes based on what I asked of you. And I don't know how Priyanka and our panel will respond, but we still have a couple of questions that came in through Pigeonhole. And Tanya, may I ask you to please check which are right?
Yeah, he says he can't open his mic.
Oh, can Hussain Jarbar in this consortium, can you...
I'm sorry, we're doing this in a webinar format, so let's invite us as a panelist.
So, Jarbar Saha, would you type out your question, please, then Priyanka can see it and respond based on your typed out.
Yes, it can go into Pigeonhole. Not in the chat. Thank you so much.
Daniel Willis says from the Pigeonhole that the ADB says it doesn't finance coal, but its funding of Indonesia's PLN allows it to use funds for any of its activities, including coal development. Will the ADB investigate this and remediate the harms? Yeah, pretty much. It has the highest number of votes. And then there are 2 quick questions that I'll go through quickly. Priyanka, can you see the questions in the Pigeonhole? Are you able to? No. Okay. I'm the privileged one. How do you see the trend of Energy Transition Fund transparency and accountability? Clearly, this is a question that is really agitating many of our minds because, we have seen, somebody mentioned it also, that there's a total lack of transparency on how your schemes are being, all this coal phase out and repurposing. We just don't know what you're actually thinking and why. So we need more transparency, definitely. How do gender dynamics intersect with issues of energy transition and justice? Don't shy away from this one, Priyanka, as energy chief. Energy is so crucial to everybody's lives, and especially to women's lives. So, yes. Given the positioning of ADB's policies generate from partner countries' consensus, how do you think you can assert the rights of community against their elected government? They can refuse projects to suffer is the question. What is the guarantee that just transition will provide to the poor and ensure rights to them? As we see worldwide, this also might go serve the rich and some free bits to few. I know that Tanya would love to answer this, as would our panelists.
Sorry, I have Hussein's.
You have, may I just?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hussain from Indus Consortium, Pakistan, talks of the ADB's finance 660 megawatt Jamshoro coal power plant that has been in the limelight since its commissioning. Recently, news has been circulating regarding the Jamshoro considering options to convert the 660 coal power plant currently operating with imported coal into local tar coal. Even though the communities are already facing severe impacts of coal-fired plants in the form of air pollution, water pollution, and all the impacts of local tar coal on communities will be more adverse. Because it's a lignite kind of coal, okay, with high sulfur content. So his question is there no official statement from ADB? What is the stance of ADB with regards to relevant news about the conversion, I think, of coal power plants into local coal? Should ADB consider prospects for early retirement of the Jamshoro coal power plant under its ETM or through any jetties rather than what you are considering currently? We'll give it to Priyanka first, very quickly, very efficiently, like we would like our energy systems to be.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. And probably I cannot go into every individual question when it comes to answering. First of all,
may I interject here, Priyanka, because that's your favorite. Sorry, but I'm interjecting. I know that now you have the cloak of paucity of time also. So questions raised while you answer generally now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. Yes.
I may have to get in touch with the
Yes. We will feed you those questions in writing.
And one thing that I want to check with you, whether there is in the audience we have Bruce or any of his teams from Safeguard Office who can answer on the safeguard side more elaborately against doing it. Anyone?
Yeah, we have the gentleman here, and Bruce there. But let's hear you. Let's hear the panel, and then we can have a conversation with them.
Yeah, sure. I'll quickly run through on the technical side because I think safeguard side is not fair by the safeguard group if I try to answer too elaborately. Overall, I must say that when it comes to mining operations, we have not gone into mining operations as yet in any of these interventions. We are very closely watching and how we can go into it, but we'll make sure that it complies with energy policy and all the other policies when we go into it. And as someone quite rightly said, the policy-based loans and the TAs may not take into consideration some of these safeguard elements, but then when it comes to the spirit of it, I'm pretty sure when we go into it, we will keep all that in mind. Keep in mind, all our colleagues, including me, we are also part of the society. So when we go into this, we always have all these in mind. We don't just go by the business, but we go by our conscience also. So keep that in mind and keep trusting us when it comes to these things. When it comes to large rainfall, when it comes to disasters, we learn a lot from these disasters. In fact, I was going to tell you that even a few days ago, I think there was a huge disaster in Brazil. A large dam has collapsed, and Kenya is actually on alert for another dam collapse. And we are very conscious of the fact that these large dam projects can harm the societies, and we need to make sure that we bring the right engineering skills, right third-party reviews and everything else, but we can bring it to ensure that we protect these communities while we satisfy the clean energy transition wherever and how in the most acceptable manner. When it comes to JP and EDM in both in Vietnam as well as in Indonesia, of course, we have a dedicated team, we have a dedicated director who handles energy transition mechanism and JP, and we will make sure that these are all in line with the overall spirit and the concept of just energy transition. I think at the moment, when it comes to gender, of course, gender, as you quite rightly said, is part and parcel of our energy sector operation. In fact, I am proud that I am the first who brought in gender elements into an energy project about 15 years ago, and we will continue to make sure that gender elements, gender aspects are very much embedded and mainstreamed in energy projects, all energy projects what we do. So that I will assure you as long as I am going to be around. So I think overall, I am not in any disagreement with most of these comments made, and we'll try to make sure that we bring the right balance when it comes to energy project with keeping all these aspects in mind. And I'll stop there, and individual, as you said, the project-specific responses I can bring in, to our own project officers who are responsible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, and that was super quick and efficient. JD.
Well, we remain open to any constructive engagement about how climate-smart mining in the ATM can be improved without prejudice to any disruptive mode of engagement that we will reserve, especially when the communities are forced into a situation when even the governments that they elect are not able to protect and promote their human rights. But thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you, JD. Mayank. Speak up. Yes.
We look forward to the compliance with the energy policy, and we still hope that we have a full phase out of all solutions come term evaluation of the energy policy next year.
Thank you.
I think just overall, we continue to see, as many people pointed out in the audience, the clear divide between the kind of quote-unquote just transition that is being supported and underpinned by the ADB's current energy policy and other current project financing, TA financing, that still supports the rights of corporations that have been tacitly and not so tacitly benefiting from the destruction of our planetary commons and threatening the security and well-being of our communities. And so on the contrary, this is why we continue to put forward our vision of a just transition bottom up, and that we will continue to advocate, and you will hear us back here every year, but also in between, in the streets, at the headquarters, and beyond.
Thank you, Tanya. Siti.
So many communities in Indonesia resist the planned and the existing geothermal projects. So when people say no, then ADB has to respect their right to say no. And we see that compliance, you are very convinced about that, but the experience on the ground doesn't show it. Please go check if you don't believe us. So then, if people say no, then no projects are allowed to be there.
Thanks, Titi.
Actually, what I want to say very shortly is that experience of Georgia in relation to the large hydros shows clearly that there is need to ADB to think about some mechanisms when the destruction that this or that project is bringing, where ADB is involved, has to be taken seriously and responsibly to the concerns of the local population. And also, I just want to highlight once again, because locals made this collective letter towards you and asking you what for us, what needs to be done for them. I mean, who would respond for the concerns that they have, for the damage that they have when the company just still keeps refusing the compensations.
Thank you. I think what all our panelists have tried to bring to the attention of the ADB is well represented by this artwork of an actual protest that happened in Bangladesh, close to the Sundarbans. And we've been talking time and again about how energy issues are deeply interlinked with people's lives, their livelihoods, their environment, and obviously the safeguards. And therefore here, from the people of Khulna, we bring to you what they called the safeguard cemetery, where the environment, gender, and livelihoods are the graves, and the demand to the ADB is to protect people over profit, and protect the planet over profit. So we can send you the real photographs of the protest in Khulna a couple of days ago. But I hope that you understand that civil society actors here who have shown good faith in the ADB's willingness to listen and willingness to reform by coming all this way, are actually speaking up for communities who are actually at the end of their tether, and that the ADB needs to take a load of what they are saying very seriously. Sometimes it sounds very good. Priyanka, whatever you said, except of course the large hydro, sounded good. But we need to see that it works for our communities on the ground, and that the safeguard policies also work with your department to see that no harm is done. And if harm has been done, then immediate redress, restitution, and reparations are due to them. Thank you, Amy, Mayank, Tanya, Titi, Dato, and this wonderful audience, and those. Thank you especially to Priyanka for braving it out, go from far away, and thank you for the Safeguards people who we hope we will come back to all of you in writing so that we have some answers in writing that we hope to share with all of you. Our eyes will continue to be on the ADB and we will keep pushing. Thank you.